My husband's drunken affair turned my life upside down. Now the other woman says she's pregnant, begged me to leave him, and revealed a shocking ultimatum that could change everything. When your entire world tilts on its axis, it's not a dramatic shift at first. It's more like the slow, unsteady realization that nothing will ever be the same again. That's how it felt when my husband drunkenly stumbled through our front door 2 months ago, and everything began unraveling. It was late, well past midnight, when his coworker dropped him off. He could barely stand, tears streaming down his face, mumbling incoherently. I'd never seen him like this before. My husband isn't the type to lose control, especially not like that. I tried to help him to the couch, but his legs wouldn't cooperate, and I couldn't manage his dead weight. So there he was, sprawled out on the living room floor, muttering fragmented words that made no sense. I figured he was just overly drunk, maybe stressed from work. I grabbed a blanket, and we both survived the night. Him passed out, me wide awake, wondering what on earth had happened. The next morning, he dropped the bombshell. His words came in broken pieces, his voice trembling, and his eyes bloodshot from the night before. He admitted that he'd slept with someone else. It was a drunken, one-night mistake, he said. He didn't even remember much about it. Just fragments, hazy and disjointed. But the core truth was undeniable. My husband, my partner of nearly 2 decades, had cheated on me. I'd like to say I handled the news with grace, but that would be a lie. The emotional storm that followed was raw, ugly, and overwhelming. I screamed, cried, threw words at him that I didn't know I was capable of. Our kids woke up to the commotion, and I had to pull myself together long enough to lie to them, telling them everything was fine. Inside, though, I felt like I was shattering into a million pieces. For a moment, there was a sliver of hope that this wasn't a betrayal in the traditional sense. His story about the foggy memory and how little he'd drunk raised red flags. We got him tested for drugs, praying, how twisted is that? That he might have been drugged, and this wasn't a deliberate choice. But the tests came back clean. No drugs, no excuses, just him, alcohol, and a catastrophic lapse in judgment. The past 2 months have been the hardest of my life. Therapy has been our lifeline, though it feels like we're patching a sinking ship with duct tape. Some people would call me weak for staying, and trust me, I've questioned myself endlessly. Divorce crossed my mind more times than I can count, but the idea of ripping apart the life we built together was unbearable. We've been together since we were teenagers, high school sweethearts who built a life brick by brick. Walking away felt impossible, even as staying felt equally insurmountable. And then came the text. A few days ago, the other woman found a way to contact him. She sent him a photo of her blood work. She's pregnant. That single message sent us spiraling all over again. After hours of tense discussions, we agreed that I would be the one to meet her. There was an innocent life at stake, and I needed to understand what her intentions were. Meeting her was surreal. I went in expecting someone I could easily hate, but instead, I saw a young woman who seemed just as lost and overwhelmed as I felt. She's 28, not much younger than us, and from what she shared, she grew up in a strict religious household. That doesn't excuse anything, of course, but it painted a picture of someone who was ill-prepared for the consequences of her actions. When I asked what she planned to do about the pregnancy, her response caught me completely off guard. She wanted me to leave my husband. She sat there, crying, as she explained how her boyfriend would leave her, how her family would disown her, and how she couldn't raise the baby alone. She even tried to make it sound like I'd be better off without him, throwing around ideas of settlements and fresh starts. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle either. It was the kind of unhinged laughter that earns you stares in public places. She started crying harder, but I couldn't stop. This whole situation had pushed me to the brink of sanity, and that laugh felt like my only tether to reality. When I finally composed myself, I made it clear. I wasn't leaving him. If she chose to have the baby, we'd figure out support and custody, but that was the extent of it. Her tears turned into full-blown sobs in the middle of the cafe. She begged me to reconsider, but I shut her down. My husband is all I've ever known. We've built a life, a family, a history together that I refuse to let her destroy because of one night. If I left him, what would happen? He'd marry her out of obligation, and she'd become a stepmother to my kids? No. I wasn't going to let her rewrite my life. After that, we left things unresolved, but I had clarity about my own boundaries. My husband blocked her number, handing over all communication to me. It wasn't something I asked for, but it was his way of showing he's committed to repairing the damage. Now we're waiting for a paternity test to confirm whether the baby is his. Until then, everything feels like it's suspended in limbo. I don't know what the future holds. If the child is his, it will change everything again. But for now, I'm holding on to what little sanity I have left, trying to piece together the fragments of my broken trust and rebuild the life we nearly lost. Second story, my daughter blamed me for our divorce and demanded I get back together with her father. I finally told her she could live with him if she wanted to, and now I regret it. I never expected my relationship with my daughter to reach this point, but here we are. It's been 2 years since my ex and I divorced, and while I thought time would heal the wounds, things haven't gotten easier. We have 2 kids, a 4-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. My daughter is the oldest, and despite everything, she absolutely adores her father. But that love hasn't shielded her from the pain of our split. In fact, she's taken it the hardest. She's blamed me for not working things out for the sake of the family, and I've struggled to know how to help her understand my decision. We've all been through therapy, family therapy and individual sessions for each of us. Some days it feels like progress, and other days it's like we're stuck in a loop, making little headway. My daughter, especially, seems to have a hard time grasping the idea that sometimes parents just can't make things work, no matter how much they try. She's adamant that families should stay together, and I get where she's coming from. She wants things to be like they were before the divorce, even though I can't give that to her. You see, I have my own personal reasons for the choices I made. Growing up, I watched my mother go through hell with my father. He cheated on her time and time again, but she never left. She didn't want to be a single mom, and I think part of her believed things would get better if she just stuck around. But they never did. He was always off with another woman, and she was left holding the pieces. That's not a life I wanted for myself or my children. I swore to myself that I wouldn't settle for a relationship where cheating was tolerated, no matter how much it hurt. Yet, in a cruel twist of irony, my mom still insists that I should have tried harder to make it work with my ex, for the sake of the kids. The holidays are the worst for her, especially Christmas. My ex isn't exactly the most reliable person, and of course it always ends up being my fault when he doesn't come through. She sees it as things would be so much easier if we all lived together again. But that's not the reality I'm living. Yesterday was a breaking point. My daughter had been looking forward to going ice skating with her father. He promised he would take her, and I even tried to remind him to keep his word. But as usual, he never showed up. I was at my wits' end trying to juggle everything and manage the fallout. But here's the kicker. Somehow, in my daughter's eyes, it became my fault. According to her, if we lived together, her dad wouldn't be so stressed out, and he'd have more time for her and for all of us. That was the moment it all hit me. I could feel the weight of her words, and I finally snapped. In a moment of frustration, I told her she was old enough to make her own decisions, and that if she wanted to live with her father, she was free to go. I wouldn't stop her. It was the harshest thing I'd said in a long time, and as soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. But at the same time, I felt like I was at the end of my rope. I had tried so hard to be a good mother, to balance everything, being a single mom, working through the trauma, raising 2 kids, and dealing with an unreliable ex, but I was starting to break. So here I am, asking, am I the asshole for telling my daughter she could live with her father if she wanted to? I never thought it would come to this, but I feel like I'm out of options. I just want her to understand that sometimes things can't be fixed, no matter how much we wish they could. Third story. Should I let my grieving sister invite 20+ strangers to our Christmas Eve celebration? A family tradition on the brink of chaos. I'm the oldest of 4 sisters, and every year, my husband and I host our family's Christmas Eve celebration. It's a tradition we've cherished for years, and we always look forward to it. My husband, who's in his early 50s, and I, at 47, live in the same city as my parents, and we're all a tight-knit family that truly enjoys spending time together during the holidays. On Christmas Eve, we have a tradition called the Feast of the Seven Fishes, and while it's always a bit chaotic, it's also a blast. My nieces and nephews eagerly wait to open the gifts we've picked out for them. This night is one of the few times each year when our family gathers under one roof, and the excitement is palpable. We're expecting 12 people this year, which is a manageable group for us, and we're looking forward to it. It's part of what makes Christmas so special to us. Christmas Day, however, is a bit different. We don't typically have a big family gathering. My sisters and parents do their own thing, whether it's spending time with in-laws or friends. It's how we've always handled it, and it works for us. Only one of my sisters, Caroline, is married. She's been with Greg for several years. Christmas Day is usually a quieter day for us, spent in smaller family units. But then last night changed everything. Greg's brother, who was in his early 50s, passed away suddenly. It seems to have been from natural causes, though it's still a huge shock. He lived in the same city as us, and though we didn't see him often, we'd catch up a couple of times a year during family barbecues or Thanksgiving dinners that Caroline would host. His sudden passing is devastating for the family. I feel for Greg and his relatives. No one expects to lose a family member like that. Greg's siblings, who live out of town, are all coming to the city to support him and their mother. Understandably, Caroline, who's deeply affected by her husband's loss, wants to bring the entire extended family, Greg's siblings, their children, and their mother, over to our home for Christmas Eve. And here's where things get tricky. She's now telling me that, since the whole family will be in town, she wants to invite them all over to our house. That would bring the guest list from the 12 we were expecting to more than 20. It's a nice gesture. But the problem is, we hardly know most of them. The last time I saw many of Greg's siblings was at a family barbecue a few years ago, and to be honest, they tend to bring a lot of drama into any situation. It's just not a peaceful environment. And I'm not sure I'm ready for that on Christmas Eve. I'm really torn here. I understand that Greg's family is grieving, and I don't want to seem cold-hearted or unsympathetic. But at the same time, I'm not sure it's fair to derail the Christmas celebration we've planned for our family just to accommodate people we don't know well, especially when the situation could cause unnecessary tension. I'm concerned about the logistics. We simply don't have the space to comfortably fit that many extra people, especially at the last minute. The food alone would be a significant expense, and we don't have gifts for everyone. This is a difficult spot to be in. Caroline's family is grieving, and I don't want to come off as insensitive. But I also don't want to turn our holiday into a chaotic, crowded event. So here's the question. Would I be wrong if I told Caroline no? Would I be the jerk for wanting to keep our Christmas Eve celebration small and manageable? Or should I suck it up and go along with it for the sake of her family's grief?